Hello everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. I'm excited to take you through an exploration of the methods, origins, and tools that historians use to evaluate the authenticity and reliability of historical texts. The focus of this session is on historical criticisms, and it's part of Chapter 1, Lesson 3. We'll be looking at how experts determine whether a historical document is genuine and trustworthy, and the different techniques they employ in their analysis. So, let's get started and dive into this fascinating topic together. Let's explore what historical criticism is all about. It can be broadly divided into two main categories: external criticism and internal criticism. These two approaches together form the foundation of a rigorous historical analysis. External criticism focuses on reconstructing the historical context in which the author and the original audience lived. It involves situating the document within its specific time and place to better understand its background. On the other hand, internal criticism aims to determine the original meaning of the text itself, often called the sensus literalis historicus. This means understanding what the text truly intended to convey, in its literal sense, within its historical setting. The overarching goal here is to grasp the original meaning of the writings, which helps us see how they were understood in their own time. To achieve this, historical critique seeks to uncover the circumstances that led to the creation of these early texts. So, in summary, historical criticism helps us connect the dots, understanding both the context in which a text was written and what it originally meant, forming a crucial part of our overall approach to biblical study. Let's take a closer look at the origins and evolution of historical criticism. Starting in the 17th century, we see its roots beginning to form, laying the groundwork for what would become a more systematic approach to biblical studies. Moving into the 19th century, especially during the Protestant Reformation, the development of historical criticism gained momentum. During that time, scholars relied heavily on philosophical and theological interpretations, because there was limited access to historical investigations. As we progress into the 20th century, historical criticism really gained prominence. It became more systematic and empirical, moving beyond purely theological frameworks. This shift allowed for a more rigorous analysis of biblical texts, emphasizing historical context and evidence. Over time, these methods diversified further, leading to a rich array of methodologies such as source criticism, form criticism, redaction criticism, tradition criticism, and canonical criticism. All of these approaches continue to shape the way we study and interpret biblical texts today, highlighting the ongoing evolution of this important discipline. When we look at the substance and significance of testimonies, it's really about understanding how reliable and truthful the content is within a document. We want to evaluate whether what's written can be trusted and how it contributes to our overall understanding. Now, moving into internal criticism, this is all about the origin of the document. We ask questions like, who authored this? Where did it come from? And what are the sources behind it? Essentially, we're assessing the authenticity of the material itself to see if it's genuine or has been altered. On the other hand, external criticism involves a broader historical perspective. It has two main parts, each playing a crucial role. First, we look at the document's origin and authenticity, making sure it's what it claims to be. Second, we examine its context, reliability, and the circumstances under which it was created. Together, these two components, internal and external criticism, form a comprehensive framework. They help us determine not just if a document is real, but also if its content is trustworthy. This combined approach is essential for accurately evaluating historical sources and building a solid understanding of the past. When we talk about external criticism, we're really focusing on establishing a solid factual foundation before diving into the deeper analysis of a document's content. So, the first questions we ask are, where and when was this document produced? Understanding its origin helps us verify its authenticity. Next, we consider the authorship. Who actually wrote it? Knowing the author gives us context and credibility. Then, we look at the sources. What materials or references did the author draw upon? This helps us assess the reliability of the information. We also examine the physical form. Are the materials, handwriting, and format consistent with the claimed period? All these questions are about verifying the document's outward, factual aspects. That's why we call this external criticism. It's about the document's outward features rather than its internal message. The main goal here is to determine, is this document what it claims to be? Who wrote it? When and where was it created? By answering these questions thoroughly, we build a foundation that ensures the document's authenticity before we analyze its content more deeply. When approaching a historical document, it's crucial that we, as critics, truly understand what the author intended to convey. We need to see the document from the author's own perspective, which helps us draw accurate and sound conclusions. One key aspect is the credibility of the sources cited. Are these sources trustworthy? Are they well established and reliable? This plays a big role in how much weight we give to the information. Next, we ask ourselves about the author's knowledge. Was the author in a position to know what they reported? Did they have access to the right information at the right time? We also consider the prevailing influences when the document was written. Were there biases, pressures, or influences that could have affected the author's perspective? Recognizing these helps us understand potential distortions or motivations. Then, there's the accuracy of the facts. Did the events happen exactly as described, or could there be inaccuracies or embellishments? All these questions fall under what we call internal criticism. The main focus here is on whether the document, even if authentic, is accurate and trustworthy. We evaluate the reliability of the testimonies within the document and assess how truthful they seem to be. This process, known as higher or internal criticism, is about digging into the substance and significance of what's said, beyond just how it looks outwardly. It's about critically analyzing the content to determine its true value and reliability within the overall historical context. A key strategy in assessing historical sources is to compare the information with other reliable sources that cover the same issue or were created around the same time. By doing this, we can evaluate the text's authenticity through comparison or contrast of features like cultural customs, traditions, and historical events. From these comparisons, we can draw meaningful conclusions about the reliability of the source. When we conduct a comparative analysis, we study the writing style, the script, and the language used in the source, all while considering the period and place where it was produced. Our main goal is to determine whether the content remains unaltered and truly reflects the author's original intentions. This is especially important because forgery was quite common during the Middle Ages, so we need to examine the material carefully from multiple angles. External criticism plays a vital role here in establishing authenticity. It involves techniques like diplomatic critique, which looks at the document's form and structure, and paleographical criticism, which examines the handwriting and script. These methods help us verify whether the source is genuine or has been tampered with, ensuring that our conclusions are based on solid evidence. When assessing historical documents, it is crucial to establish with certainty that the facts reported by the author are indeed accurate and occurred exactly as described. This means we need to carefully verify the authenticity of the information presented. Next, we should consider the influences and biases that might have been prevalent at the time of writing. These influences can shape or even distort the author's account, so understanding the context in which the document was created helps us interpret it more accurately. It's also important to evaluate whether the author had sufficient knowledge and proximity to the events they describe. The closer the author was to the actual events, the more reliable their report is likely to be. Another key aspect is source credibility. We need to examine the sources cited within the document to determine if they are trustworthy and well-founded. Reliable sources lend greater credibility to the overall account. Finally, internal criticism involves scrutinizing the facts within the document itself. While we're not necessarily trying to prove the authenticity of the entire material, we must critically assess the accuracy of the facts before drawing any conclusions. All of these steps, verifying facts, understanding influences, evaluating the author's knowledge, and checking source credibility, are essential parts of a thorough historical analysis. They help us get closer to the truth behind the records we study. Now, moving on to slide 9, let's talk about how we distinguish between fraudulent or misrepresented documents and authentic ones. Historians use specific tests for this purpose, and interestingly, these same tests are often employed in police and legal investigations as well. One key test we'll focus on here is the test of authenticity. Under this, the main method is called external criticism. External criticism involves examining the physical and contextual aspects of a document, things like the material, handwriting, ink, and the provenance or history of the document itself. The goal is to verify whether the document's external features align with what we expect from a genuine artifact. This process is crucial because it helps us establish whether a document is real or if it has been altered or fabricated. By applying these methods, historians can confidently differentiate between authentic historical records and forgeries, which is essential for maintaining the integrity of our historical understanding. So, in essence, external criticism is about scrutinizing the document's outward features to validate its authenticity, ensuring that we base our conclusions on credible sources. When examining the inks used in a document, I look for clues about its age or any elements that seem out of place for the period it claims to be from. Modern chemical testing can be incredibly revealing, as it helps us determine whether the ink formulations actually match the supposed time of production. Moving on to paper and writing materials, before the 15th century, paper was quite rare in Europe, and printing was not yet known. Pencils weren't around until the 16th century, and typewriters only appeared in the 19th century. So, if I find any of these materials in an earlier document, it immediately raises suspicion about its authenticity. By estimating the probable date of the document, I can analyze the materials used, such as the paper and ink, to see if they are consistent with that specific time period. These detailed examinations are crucial because they help us verify whether a document is genuine or a forgery, supporting the overall effort to establish its authenticity and reliability. When examining these physical features, we're using a multi-layered approach to verify authorship. This method helps reduce the chances that a skilled forger can fool a thorough investigator. Even if the handwriting looks unfamiliar, we can compare it with authenticated specimens to find potential matches. This comparative approach allows us to draw probabilistic conclusions about who might have written the document, even if we don't find an exact match. For example, with handwriting comparison, we analyze the style of the handwriting against known samples. Signatures are checked for consistency with those we've already authenticated. Seals are examined to confirm their authenticity and whether they match the period's typical design. We also look at letterheads to spot any formatting or content that doesn't fit the historical context. Watermarks are used to help date the paper and determine where it was made. By employing these various techniques, historians aim to identify the possible author of a document. They look at a wide range of physical and stylistic markers to establish connections between the document and its supposed creator. This thorough analysis helps us build a stronger case for authorship, even when the evidence isn't crystal clear at first glance. Seals have been a fascinating subject for sigillographers, who study them in detail to distinguish genuine, authentic period seals from forgeries. By analyzing aspects like the design, the material used, and the craftsmanship, experts can identify whether a seal is authentic. This meticulous analysis helps us better understand historical authenticity and prevent fraud. Moving on, through techniques such as paleography and diplomatics, methods systematized by Mabilon in the 17th century, experts have recognized that certain regions and time periods developed their own conventionalized handwriting styles for official documents. These specialized techniques allow us to analyze and interpret the unique features of historical documents, giving us insight into their origins and authenticity. Finally, there's a clear need for isographies, biographical dictionaries that provide examples of handwriting. Currently, These resources are limited, but they would be incredibly valuable. Having comprehensive references would significantly improve our ability to compare handwriting styles across different periods and regions, making document authentication much more accurate. When we combine paleography, diplomatics, and sigillography, we gain a powerful toolkit for understanding and verifying historical documents. Each discipline contributes a piece to the puzzle, helping us piece together authentic history from the often complex and layered evidence left behind. When examining a historical document, there are several linguistic clues that can help us determine its authenticity. One key aspect is looking at idioms or phrases that simply weren't in use during the claimed time period. If you see expressions that feel modern or out of place, that's a red flag. Orthography, or the spelling conventions used in the document, can also be revealing. If the spelling doesn't match what was typical for that era, it might suggest a forgery. The same goes for punctuation styles. If the punctuation appears more modern than the document itself, that's another clue. Proper names and places are also important. If you notice spellings that seem anachronistic, like names that didn't exist at the time, that's suspicious. Grammar is another telltale sign. Errors that don't align with the grammatical norms of the period can point to later editing or fabrication. So what do analysts focus on? Spelling, especially of proper names and signatures, can reveal forgeries. Similarly, inconsistent grammatical errors can suggest the document isn't authentic. Experts familiar with contemporary writing styles can detect anachronistic language, such as out-of-place idioms, orthography, or punctuation, that doesn't fit the historical context. Language naturally evolves, and when we find modern linguistic features in an older document, it's a strong indicator that it might be a forgery. By carefully analyzing these linguistic clues, whether it's style, spelling, or punctuation, we can assess whether a document truly belongs to the period it claims to originate from. When we encounter references to events that are geographically or contextually remote from what we know about the author's world, it raises questions about how plausible the account really is. It's like seeing a story about a place or event far removed from the author's known environment, something that makes us wonder if the account is accurate or perhaps fabricated. Next, we look at the timing of documents. If a document mentions an event that happened long after the date it claims to have been written, that's a red flag. It suggests the document was written or altered at a later time, which can point to manipulation or forgery. On the other hand, if a document references an event that hadn't yet occurred when it was supposedly written, that's even more telling. It means the author had knowledge they simply couldn't have had at that point in time, indicating possible deception or fraud. Fraudulent documents often reveal these issues through what we call anachronistic references, mentions of events that are either too early, too late, or too distant in time compared to the supposed origin of the document. As Gottschalk pointed out back in 1969, spotting these anachronisms is a key way to identify forgeries. So, in summary, by carefully examining references to distant places or times, we can uncover inconsistencies that help us determine whether a document is genuine or fraudulent. It's all about understanding the timing and context of the references within the overall story. Even the most careful forgery tends to leave traces that a trained specialist can identify, as Gottschalk pointed out back in 1969. These traces often show up as small details that don't quite match what the original author would have included naturally. For example, a forgery might overlook minor stylistic nuances or typical phrases, making it stand out under close examination. Another common sign is the inclusion of unfamiliar information, details that the original author wouldn't have known or referenced at the time. This can be a big red flag when experts analyze the document's content. Additionally, subtle inconsistencies in tone, style, or vocabulary can reveal that a later hand has tampered with the original. Even skilled forgers, who often meticulously imitate well-known sources, may still leave behind clues. These might be specific passages or stylistic quirks that don't quite fit the overall work. That's why detection involves careful analysis of the entire document. Now, one of the most interesting techniques used in forgery detection is the alibi test. If a document claims the author was somewhere at a certain time, but that's impossible, say, they couldn't have been at that location, it raises serious suspicions. This is similar to methods used in criminal investigations, where establishing an alibi can confirm or deny a suspect's involvement. So, in essence, by cross-checking dates and locations, we can spot inconsistencies that point to forgery. This approach helps us differentiate genuine documents from cleverly faked ones, reinforcing the importance of thorough, expert analysis in preserving the integrity of historical records. Legal experts recognize that provenance, or the history of a document's custody, is a crucial indicator of its authenticity. When we can trace a document's custody through a credible and unbroken chain, it significantly strengthens the case that the document is genuine. This is true even if there isn't other supporting evidence. Provenance refers specifically to the documented chain of custody, where the document has been kept, who has held it, and under what conditions. Think of it this way. If a document is found in a logical expected location, such as a family archive or a government records office, it carries an inherent presumption of legitimacy. It would be quite unlikely for a forger to successfully plant a fraudulent document in a secure, well-maintained archive without detection. In such cases, the provenance or custody history creates a strong presumption of authenticity, which legal experts like Gottschalk have highlighted. So basically, the more we can establish a clear, credible chain of custody, the more confidently we can assert that the document is authentic, even without additional evidence. This plays a key role in legal and historical investigations, reinforcing the importance of provenance in establishing trust and authenticity.